It's a pretty big chair. Huh?
Can everyone hear us? Yeah, okay, cool. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Elad, the CEO and co-founder of MarketAcross. We're one of the most prominent PR agencies in the space. We also have a Chainwire, which is a press release distribution platform. So I'm a marketeer. I'm not a super heavy tech guy, so most of my questions, if you may, will be from that point of view, because I leave the stage to you to dig deep into the technicalities of it. And I would like to give you the stage to present yourselves and the projects that you're representing. So we can start with you.
Hi, my name is Krishna. I'm also not a super technical guy. I'm a co-founder of Zircuit. Zircuit's basically a ZK rollup that focuses on preventing exploits and hacks on the chain. And we do this through something called sequencer level security, where we have software that plugs into sequencer that can basically prevent certain types of exploit transactions.
Hey guys, my name is Shuyao. You can also call me Brother Bing on Twitter. I'm one of the co-founders of MegaETH. We are the first real-time blockchain because not only do we have God speed throughput, we also have the lowest latency ever possible, which is 10 milliseconds, going into 1 millisecond. And our superpower is we do not like decentralization. We love centralized sequencer. We'll continue to be very proudly centralized. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, that's a good point for debate. We're going to talk about it.
Hello, my name is Tom Ngo. I'm the CEO of Metis L2. I'm your counterpart because we're really big into decentralization. It's one of our main ethos here at Metis. One of the first L2 to decentralize our sequencer, and that's been our focus. We started out as a L2 scaling solution, and we're moving into other areas as well, Bitcoin, and yeah, so great to be here.
Hey guys, my name is Julien Bouteloup. I'm the founder of Stake Capital. So it's a hedge fund. We invest in the space. We also have a venture studio, and I've been in space for quite some time. One of the main advisor and investor of Curve Finance. So I've been seeing the DeFi space from the beginning, and I've been investing in building in centralized solutions and decentralized solutions. So I will be probably in the middle.
Cool. So let's start by first maybe try to define these elements of decentralization and speed, and could they live together? Do they have to be separate, and are they mutually exclusive? Could you maybe give your 2 cents about what that means as a concept?
Yeah, I think for me, speed is a really catch-all term because I think users mainly care about like fast confirmation, fast finality, and basically like a low cost of making their transaction and low latency. I think like you can have really fast transactions, but if there's a high transaction failure rate, like Solana, for example, I think it can result in frustration for the user. So like that's the perspective that I think from, and not speed as a catch-all term. With regards to decentralization, I think mainly users just care about not getting rugged and having a safe blockchain where they can transact and it doesn't fail and stops producing blocks, and your DeFi transaction has to get reversed, or there's a reorg or something like that. So that's how I would look at it, and I don't really look at it purely from like the ideological point of view.
Yeah, so our definition of decentralization is censorship resistant. That's it. And then our definition of speed is throughput and, more important, latency. Latency matters in the way of, when you organize a grab in Thailand, are you going to get your grab ASAP, or you're going to have to load for some time and realize, okay, your grab is 5 kilometers away, and you're going to be stuck in traffic for an hour, just like what happened today with me. Right? So both are important metrics. And from our perspective, there is no either/or. In fact, we believe that for any network, if you're trying to get decentralization and performance at the same time, you're almost like mid-curving the world. A better way to do this is part of the stack is maximizing decentralization, which is what Ethereum does really well and Bitcoin as well. And then another part of the stack that does performance really well that you can build on layer 2, for example. But if you're trying to do both, I think you're not going to succeed at either.
From our perspective, we see decentralized as important. That's why we're really building in the blockchain space. If we're really focused on extreme speed, there's a lot of, I would say, centralized solutions out there that are equally or better. Are we where we're at with blockchain? Not quite on the speed side, but I think speed is important as well for mass adoption, especially gaming. If we want to do gaming, speed is important. Everything is about speed, right? User input time and how much time is loading on the screen. All that matters. For me, speed is extremely important. But in the blockchain space, decentralization is important, especially if we have a lot of capital on chain or on an L2. If we don't have that censorship resistance and the capital gets stuck, especially from a traditional finance standpoint, that's extremely hard to really stomach, even from a risk analysis for any TradeFi funds to go online or take assets or tokenize them. This is something that they have to consider. So I think from a speed and decentralization, I think there is a balance, but not everybody has the same kind of requirement, risk appetite, and it just depends on the user base.
Well, as the founder of Rect News, and the guy running the website, I can tell you that retail doesn't really care about decentralization as long as he can make money. So they care when they get wrecked, so they want to understand why it was not fully decentralized and correctly censorship resistant. But yeah, what retail cares in the space, and we've seen it in different blockchains, is speed. And I agree with Shuyao, it's what matters is speed. But the long-term basis, in order to build scalability and yeah, all interconnection between different blockchains, then we need decentralization for the long term. But we need speed right now in order to not get our piece of the cake eaten by competitors. That's for sure.
So do you think in the next, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, as Ethereum develops and the L2 space in Ethereum develops, is there a scenario where there always need to be a sacrifice of one of the other? Or do you see a scenario where decentralization and speed do live together and we manage to bridge that gap? Because the reason why blockchain started is to fight the man and to not have the middle. But then a lot of the solutions nowadays are very centralized, and and some people will argue that it kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? Do you see a scenario where we are able to bridge that gap, maybe from like as tech evolves and new ideas come to life?
Sorry, I've been silenced. I don't understand your question. I think like right now it's not performant enough. And how do we get performance with decentralization?
Yeah, I mean, right now, when you have centralized, or let's say some node providers or validators, they essentially use AWS or centralized infrastructure in order to adhere to like speed for a decentralized solution. Would there be any kind of tech advancement that can bridge that gap and ensure decentralization while enjoying the power of what today is only achieved by centralized solutions?
Maybe I can take this question first. In terms of decentralization, I think there's different components of decentralization and what level of decentralization. Like full decentralization, are we there? Quite not yet. I think even on maybe the Ethereum level, there's some parts that are pretty centralized as well. So I guess that question is kind of subjective because speed and decentralization, what part, it can vary quite a bit. But I think speed is definitely needed for the mass audience to really onboard the next million, billion users that we claim to want to do for the last few years and still working on the next million and billion users. So I think that's important. I'm not sure if we hit 100 million users yet, but that'll be a great target of why we have this technology, why we are building blockchain from a tech sector perspective. So I think that question will always be had. Is there a balance? I think there will always be a balance depending on who you're asking. And is it a game company? Is it a traditional finance company? Is it a commodities organization that wants to tokenize their assets online? So I think it's very subjective still, but I think there will be a balance. And what range?
But the question is just layer 2 architecture, right? So as layer 2s, you can have max performance. And then because you rely on layer 1 as a security and settlement layer, so you can always have escape hatch and just safely exit to layer 1. So the reason I did not understand your question is the reason we're all building in layer 2, because that is how you get both decentralization and performance. It's already been figured out. Like, Solana is also going to that route for what it's worth. Like, there's no other way to scale.
Yeah, I agree with both of Tom and Shuyao's sentiments. I think you are, to add to that, you are only as decentralized as the degree to which you inherit the true security of Ethereum, right? So if you use like an external DA provider and that DA provider fails, you're in deep trouble. Or you use a rollup as a service provider and you don't really know what you're doing, you're in deep trouble as well. For example, we had this incident recently with Degen chain and Conduit, where I think basically the chain stopped producing blocks, and then they had some sort of contentious issue, a business issue, which turned into apparently Conduit, holding the private keys to the chain hostage. So even though you inherit the security of Ethereum, if you make other design choices in other layers that are very centralized design choices, you may still be in deep trouble, and your users may get rugged. So like Shuyao suggested, you should have an escape hatch. You should really think about the design choices you make when you're building a rollup. So you can have a rollup that is very fast, but if it truly inherits the security of Ethereum, and if it has an escape hatch, I think that's already sort of a good 80-20 on decentralization to performance ratio.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's...
Would you like to add?
No, the point is we've been talking about decentralization, but we don't really define what is the purpose of decentralization. I think it's mainly for distribution of value. So that's the reason why, as long as you have some component that's centralized, but distribution of value is 100% to the people that are using the network, and also for composability, then it's fine. And that's the main goal, I think, in a retail's perspective. It's how do we capture the value across all those different tools and blockchains. And of course, the decentralized part or centralization part has to make sure that people don't get wrecked. But as long as you distribute the value and you provide utility to the network, then I think it's good.
I'll just add one more thing. I fully agree with you. I feel like that's why we have Ethereum as layer 1.
We mentioned decentralization, but it becomes like a cult, but we don't actually understand why,
Did you say cult?
Yeah, cult, yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, your French accent.
Yeah, French one.
No, I agree with you. I feel like, everyone should use Ethereum layer 1. Like, that is centralized and performant to many degree, right? Remember in 2020, I mean, we used to all shitcoining on layer 1. It was expensive, but it was, that thing worked. And I think a lot of high-value activities should go on Ethereum layer 1, just like a lot of activities go on Solana layer 1, right? And then you have all the other activities who are relatively centralized, but then it works for other activities. I don't think there is I disagree with you on balance here. I think you should just optimize for what's really important. You can't have layer 2 that's decentralized. Then you're really stuck in the middle. Are you optimizing for high-value transaction, or you're optimized for low-value transaction? You don't know, right?
Yeah, and I think consumer behavior in the space, dictates that some of the most successful use cases, ironically, have been very centralized use cases, like stable coins on Tron. And it's interesting to think about why that is true. People in these emerging markets who are using USDT for trade financing or whatever use case, they don't really care about whether it's Tron or Ethereum. They care that it's just fast and it's cheap, and I can do what I want to do.
They probably don't care for decentralization as well. They just want to do it because they're unbanked and they want to pass that USDC from this wallet to that wallet, right?
Yeah, and I think Nick Carter or someone said something very interesting about Bitcoin and layer twos, and he said, I think Bitcoin basically processes container ships, and then layer twos process all the small goods, and container ships as in large transactions and large stores of value happen on these incredibly neutral chains, and then anything that's smaller and more day-to-day happens on these layer twos or more centralized chains. I think that's an okay compromise to make, especially if you basically inherit the security of a more credibly neutral chain.
So do you see a world where decentralization is not important anymore as it is right now?
I think the other way, so some people always say like Ethereum is built for World War III, right? Like this tech is just too intense. I think it will work when it's needed, right? It's like almost preventing a black swan event. But most times we need crypto for check and balance, right? Like you kind of seeing what's going on, and when shit hits the fan, you can point out, okay, this is wrong. But you don't need the World War III technology to do that. So I think the World War III technology is always going to be there, and there's a premium why Ethereum mainnet will always worth so much. But then you don't have the same level of premium for other things that's not as decentralized, as censorship resistant as layer one. So I think we must differentiate the user experience impact of decentralization, the different grades, right? It's like 50 shades of gray. And my view has always been like, for MegaETH, right, we're always going to optimize on speed. And we're going to take the minimum amount of decentralization because we want everyone to use MegaETH.
So let's talk a bit about the security and security implications. Are there, let's say, Ethereum is like a rollup-centric, has a rollup-centric roadmap. How do you think these rollups or the optimization for speed can affect the security of the network? Or how can we assure that it's sufficiently resistant to censorship or manipulation at all?
Okay, I'll go first. I think my sort of black pill on this is that when we launched Zircuit, we actually roll-up engineering, especially when you try to do it. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
One team, one dream.
Like I think a lot of people assume that when you create a layer 2, you're just like using some RAS provider and you're spinning up some servers and you have a layer 2 now. And I think from our perspective, when we try to really focus on having good security and trust assumptions and engineering the rollup, we realize that it's better to just launch a centralized rollup initially and then decentralize it over time, as Arbitrum or anyone else has done. Because launching a chain with good uptime and a sort of stable transaction environment is already difficult enough, and I think optimizing for decentralization too early on is actually not very good and could basically shoot you in the foot. For example, I get pitches for like decentralized prover or whatever all the time, but I'm like we have to focus on improving what we already have for performance and not really adding more layers of complexity that could make the whole thing fall apart if they don't work properly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. We really took it to the extreme, right? Like MegaETH is forever going to be crazy fast. Being fast and performant is our one true North Star. So we're not planning to decentralize our sequencer at all, because the moment you decentralize your sequencer as layer 2, you're reintroducing consensus. At that point, you should just be your own layer 1. Like, you're not getting performance benefit from decentralizing at all. Instead, we're going to launch with a centralized sequencer, and we have rewritten the entire state trie of the Ethereum node, right? So for example, right now, you have all the optimistic rollup, you have the ZK rollup, but no one has ever touched the performance bottleneck of a layer 2, which is the Merkle-Patricia tree. So my co-founder, who, I don't know, they went to Stanford, study 6 years. Another one went to MIT, study 6 years. They're all PhDs. And they figured out a way to rewrite the entire state trie. So now we are going to be the most performance layer 2 out there. And to double down on performance, we're never going to decentralize sequencer. Instead, we're going to have a rotational sequencer, which means that at any moment, you still have one centralized sequencer, but it's rotate based on where you are. So from our perspective, we are taking the extreme approach. We are focusing on users. And we believe that the way that we are optimizing our chain is fundamentally beneficial to Ethereum because we're never going to leave Ethereum, right? We're actually bringing the users coming to the Ethereum network. I always joke that, Tarun, who's one of my investors, and when I met him for the first time, I said, yo, dude, why do you invest in MegaETH? He said, MegaETH is a real Solana. So we're going to out Solana in terms of performance.
I agree with that. User should be the focus. And here's another perspective is like, until something happens, until the blockchain freezes, the centralized exchange shuts down, then you see how important decentralization is and at what level, right? ETH is great, but there's different layers of operations currently. You have different ecosystem layer 3s, layer 2s, and then you have Ethereum layer 1. So if it bottlenecks, depending where it bottlenecks, then there's still a pain point, there's still a challenge. It still slows things down. We've seen it with a few blockchains that have stopped their chain, but maybe there wasn't enough capital, so it wasn't a big news. But imagine a bank that's operating on chain or something, a big financial institution, and then when things freezes and things don't happen, then you really realize how bad the problem is. So I think until things hurt, then you realize, hey, decentralization is not that important. But I think when we saw FTX collapse, everybody started trading on decentralization on perps platform that's on chain. So I think until it hurts or until there's pain points, then we realize, okay, is there a balance or is there a need of a balance? Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if we're actually opening the gate to more problems, so if we're narrowing down the number of problems. This is a question that I've been asking myself for quite some time. We've been investing in a decentralized prover, decentralized sequencer, centralized sequencer, but what I've seen is it's the same like in DeFi. We built governance tokens. Well, first there was DAOs. The DAOs were supposed to solve society and the universe, and they end up being a decentralized autonomous chaos that no one wants to even mention anymore. Then we went into DeFi and built governance tokens. I know because I was involved in V tokenomics, so then we incentivize people to accumulate the token for voting. Then we end up building an incentive platform, like what we call quote bribing a mechanism. I know because I built one of them, Vote Market. And there's other platform like Engel Merkel distributing 5-10 million rewards per week to basically incentivize the direction of vote across different pool of liquidity, across different stablecoin, USDC, USDT. We're talking to all the people. It looks like we're replicating the European Commission or European Parliament, basically, like lobbying. And now that we're moving into layer 2, the question is, we don't really want to tap into decentralizing the sequencer because then we have to have another layer of consensus, and then we have to have another token, but then the reward mechanism and the incentive is too low for those people to operate, so then it means that they need to be centralized operations. But then you have MEV capability of people being able to extract value. And it is replicating always, so we're moving from layer to layers, and I wonder where we're gonna be stopping. Because now we're thinking about provers, sequencer. What would be the next step? Maybe there will be something else coming, always. We did LST, LRT, staking. We've been complaining about traditional finance with exotic product and structured products. At the end, we don't really know what is going on. I think we're doing pretty much the same. Of course, it's on-chain, we can prove, but to which extent? And this is something that I always question myself, especially in Rect News, with the videos and movies that we make. It's a good question, because, as you said, you focus on speed, but who's going to use the sequencer? Even if you rotate, someone is going to have full control. And myself, as a validator on some big network, for example, I was on Avalanche, Polygon, etc. When you do arbitrage, sandwich attack, it's good. And This is going to be the same use case for people that are sophisticated trader and hedge fund, and we're gonna game the system. So it's more like a threshold between to where we are going to go, and are we opening the gate for more problems or narrowing down the problem? And so far, I haven't seen anyone being able to answer the question.
I just want to respond to the rotational sequence. I think you're right, and I've been through the same journey myself since I started MegaETH, because the bigger you dig into, the more you realize that many things in a network needs to be specialized. So if you really look at DeFi, right, it's really the traders, it's the hedge fund, they will actually win over you. So folks, please do not trade because you will lose money. But even when we're thinking about our rotational sequencer, what we were thinking was, the rotational sequencer can follow the sun. If the sun is in the east, right, we should have the sequencer in Japan because that's where the activities are. When the sun is in the west, then you do the same. Then you're really maximizing efficiency. And this is where I think MegaETH's performance really comes into play, right? I think about DeFi as an infrastructure. And someone, if I don't do it, someone's going to be out there optimize the hell out of DeFi or decentralized finance infrastructure in crypto. And it might as well just be us.
Yeah, but this can be gamed quite easily.
But
You
same
have
as traditional finance.
AWS data center, you can spin up nodes, all different regions, and you can be picked up by the random sequencer
But that's good.
rotations.
That's good.
So I can be the one actually maybe extracting the value all the time, basically.
But I mean, we don't have to get into MEV, but it's going to exist, it's going to exist.
Okay.
So you actually said something interesting with like the DAOs that were such a big premise of decentralization became chaos. In some cases they worked, but a lot of cases it was just like
It's in less
chaos.
than 1%, yeah.
Sorry?
The only one that worked out are Bitcoin, Ethereum.
Yeah, true. Most of them are pretty chaotic. So decentralization as a concept is something that sounds very good, but then when you try to implement it, if even like a lot of DAOs are actually controlled by the foundation because they hold most of the tokens and they control the shot, so it became centralized from a decentralized idea.
But it's also because I believe in order to accomplish the mission of a project, you need to be fully centralized. Otherwise, it's chaotic. And I think we've seen that over the past couple of years.
And maybe that's why in running like traditional companies, they don't use DAOs to do it, but more a centralized way.
Well, because the founders that have the idea in building the projects have a completely different incentive from the people using the projects. Short, medium, and long term. This is by premises, so it cannot work out.
Was the value of DAOs to be decentralized, was the value of DAOs to coordinate economically, right, in a decentralized way? So I think like if you look at the real world, like there are sort of examples of like decentralized things that have been very successful, but they still have some degree of centralization. Like you look at co-ops are the greatest example of this. There are co-ops for agriculture, co-ops for all kinds of things in the world, which operate within legal boundaries, and they have some sort of delegates that they appoint, and they've been very, very successful. There are co-ops out there that are bigger than the most centralized agriculture companies, right? So similarly, I think of like DAOs or anything else as a framework to coordinate value rather than, for the purpose of decentralization itself. And I think the more we tend towards the technological definition of decentralization, it's kind of like we just get lost in this maze where we optimize for ideology.
What's the biggest use case of decentralization right now? DAOs, delegating voting power to the person who's offering the best amount of money.
Yeah.
So we end up saying, okay, each people will be able to vote, but now everyone is actually delegating their voting power to someone that will vote for them because they are getting paid to do so. And at the end, it's just centralized voting power. It's exactly what's happening across all the products. There's not a single product that is not operating like that.
I think then those products don't need to be decentralized in the first place. We have to respect the market and respect people's behavior. I think about decentralization, especially from product perspective, as a face, right? It's a face to bootstrap what's the right market economics. So I often go back to what Airbnb and Uber does. Well, especially Airbnb, right? In the beginning, it's like sharing markets, decentralized, but quickly you have people who come in and centralize the force for economy of scale. So I think decentralized matters in that initial phase. After that, centralized power must come in for the efficiency gain.
We have 10 seconds left, and I think we can talk for days and days about decentralization and what it means. And eventually, decentralization is what brought Bitcoin into existence, and that's like the promise. But the fact of the matter is that we're also in a tech scene, and speed and actual output is extremely important. So it's a battle that's constant, and it's also very, it's a philosophy. So thank you very much for your inputs, and thank you very much for listening in.
Thank you.
Thank you.